Hello everyone, and welcome to the first video in my series on the speculative biosphere of Pangonia. For those who do not know who I am Juzo Lens 214, or Linear Steins. I am a member of Thrive's theory team, and I help to make sure we keep Thrive scientifically plausible. This video will go over some information about the speculative evolution project before going into the actual project itself. I'll go over Thrive, the game this project is tied to, and the reason I ended up doing this project as well. After that, I'll talk about the differences this speculative evolution project will have to the other ones you may have seen. Lastly, I'll go into the actual speculative evolution video itself. I should also be clear that I referenced Bibliodarian's Alien Biosphere series often while working on this project. His videos go in depth on the science behind various aspects of life and evolution, and are a great way to learn about the reasons behind traits species adapt. While I do plan to include and go over the science behind adaptations in my own series, there may be times where I won't explain in depth the science behind certain adaptations. Thrive is an evolution simulation game that consists of multiple stages that follow the evolution of the player's species and the development of a civilized society. Most of the videos I have posted so far on this channel are various playstyles players can utilize to learn more about the game. Also, if you don't know much about Thrive as a game, you can watch my other videos to see how the game looks and plays. While Thrive has only one completed stage as of this video being made, each other stage has a playable prototype or is being actively developed. Thrive is a game that has a long history compared to what some may expect for an open source project like itself. If you're interested in how Thrive went from a concept to an actual playable game, I would recommend watching Oliver Rivers' video on Thrive's history. A link to the video will be provided in the description for anyone interested in watching it. For some time during Thrive's development, a temporary mascot creature was picked out, that being an art piece of a creature dubbed the Disturbance. Due to the team not being able to get permission from the artist, a new mascot species would be designed by one of the current developers, Mr. 42, and given the name Hexaquill. The Hexaquill has now been the official mascot of the game for a year or two. As a member of the theory team, it is my job to assist the team in verifying the scientific accuracy of what is added into the game, or by creating a plausible scientific explanation for how something functions. While it may seem like the theory team is often very busy, that tends to occur more when entirely new features are being added to the game or when a question is brought up to us. I would answer the science questions that I could, but I still felt like I wasn't doing a lot of work and wanted to do something to change that. I would come up with a few different ideas for things I could work on, but none of them would have helped the game in the long term until I recalled that Thrive at this point in time had a very small number of loading screens. Not only that, but with development getting close to the completion of Microbe and the start of Multicellular and the inevitable macroscopic stages afterwards, there were even fewer loading screens showing macroscopic lifeforms. It was also around this time that the Hexaquill had been adopted as the official mascot of the game. After asking Mr. 42 if I could use the Hexaquill in some other concept creatures he had made, I had an idea of something I could work on for Thrive's development. Around May or June of 2025, I had locked in a project to add loading screens to Thrive that would follow the evolution of life on a planet set within the game itself. These loading screens would also tell a story to the players as they progress through their own games. An additional goal of the project would be for later stage loading screens to act as hints to the player on how to progress to the ultimate goal of Thrive, that being Ascension. I would begin working on creating the tectonic history of the planet that this project would take place on. The planet would be given the name Pangonia by the community as a reference to the planet name used by Thrive prior to the current patch and planet generation system. I then spent the following months figuring out the initial body plans I wanted to utilize and the first speciations that would occur on the planet. While I could keep going with the previous section, this is where I have to mention some of the differences that this speculative evolution project will have compared to other speculative evolution projects you may have come across. One of the first differences for this project occurs relatively early on, as the Hexaquill and the other concept creatures designed by Mr. 42 are targets for the early clades on the planet. This video, which consists of just the initial body plans in the first speciation event, only reaches one of those designs. The other designs, along with the hexaquill, will be reached within the next video of this series. The second difference is that the hexaquill, being the mascot for Thrive, will be the clade that eventually has the obligate sapient species of Pangonia evolve from. This is mainly to keep the hexaquill and its descendant species as the main focus of the planet's biosphere. A final difference with this project is tied to the existence of Thrive itself. Since the project is meant to represent a game of Thrive, adaptations within a given species is determined at a rate of 10 to 20,000 year increments. I will also be assuming that a player is making some adaptations to the species in each of these increments. Million-year increments are utilized to indicate when a new species has evolved. This makes it easy for myself to create an evolutionary tree similar to the one players see in the current game. I'm also able to have some fun with species at times, as Thrive is known to do some strange adaptations for species already. While this does mean that the project won't be 100% science-based, I am still going to use actual science to explain the adaptations species acquire. The use of the game simply allows me to have some fun with some of those speciations. Along with that, some thought has gone into concepts of the space stage of Thrive, mainly for myself, which has included the black hole at the center of the Thrive galaxy having some kind of reality warping effect on nearby systems. While most players will have their home systems closer to where Sol is located in the Milky Way or closer to the outer rim, Pangonia is located closer to the central black hole, meaning that some aspects of the system it is in and the tectonics of the planet don't fully match scientific accuracy. This was in part to explain some mistakes I made while creating the G-plate simulation of Pangonia's plate tectonics, but also to help explain the structure of the solar system Pangonia is located in. The system is practically a copy-paste of our own system, but with some changes to the appearance of the planets. The biggest change is the presence of a red dwarf star orbiting the main sequence yellow star at a noticeable tilt. This red dwarf star is actually an anomalous source of light with no gravitational impact on the system. The presence of the red dwarf was to allow a major difference in the plant life of Pangonia. While this video will only introduce the yellow pigmented plants, Pangonia is home to a clade of green pigmented plants as well. Each of these clades will incorporate red algae into their body cavities upon colonizing land, as the extra energy obtained when the red dwarf star rises before or sets after the main yellow star allows for an additional edge when producing glucose. We will also witness the polar habitats of Pangonia having a drastic impact on the plant life, as, unlike on Earth, when the main star has set, the red dwarf star will rise and set, allowing for sunlight to break up the long nights in certain polar zones. Even though this won't be enough to drastically end hibernation of animals, the plants will end up using the red algae symbiotes more within these regions, giving Pangonia a wide array of plant leaf colors by the modern day. It should also be mentioned that when Pangonia experiences an ice age, it occurs around the time that tetrapods would have colonized land on Earth. In order to avoid dealing with the complexity of land colonization during an ice age, I have chosen to move the speed at which life colonizes land to just after the supercontinent rifts apart. This could be considered another consequence of the red dwarf anomaly star present in the system causing changes in mutation rate. One could also assume that this game of Thrive is being played on easy difficulty, where the cost of mutations are cheaper than medium or hard games. The solar system Pangonia is a part of is an exact copy of our own solar system, primarily because I didn't want to figure out the gravitational forces for an entirely new system. As mentioned before, an object that appears to be like a red dwarf star orbits the main sequence star at a slight incline. Pangonia itself is a planet that has the exact same characteristics as Earth. Microbial life has been present for most of the planet's existence, and macroscopic life has been present for a few tens of millions of years. But starting around 541 million years ago, life on Pangonia experienced a massive explosion in diversification. Two phyla are able to dominate by this point in time and are the ancestors to the majority of life on Pangonia. A phylum is a classification used to group multiple lineages of organisms based on shared or related body plans. Examples of Earth-based animal phyla include Chordata, Mollusca, Annelida, and Cnidaria. These phyla are all a part of the kingdom Animalia. In regards to Pangonia's biosphere, the kingdoms of life that will be explored will be the kingdom Animalia and kingdom Plantae. Each phyla and clade in this project will be represented by one or more holotype specimens. These species will contain all of the specific features of the clade it belongs to. In order to create a body plan for the ancestral species, it helps to look at various species of animals on Earth that are distantly related. In his video, Bibliodarian uses vertebrates and arthropods as his example for similarities in animal body plans. With the examples he uses, Bibliodarian points out the similarities present in having a head housing the sensory organs, a body or thorax, a rear end, and limbs for movement. This is a result of convergent evolution, where different species develop similar adaptations to deal with a shared evolutionary pressure. Body plan features among kingdom Animalia include a line or lines of symmetry, a digestive tract, as well as a cardiovascular system in addition to the previously mentioned similarities. The first big distinction for the initial body plans on Pangonia is tied to the organism's symmetry. One of the body plans has bilateral symmetry or a single line of symmetry running from the anterior to the posterior of the individual. On Earth, bilaterally symmetrical species tend to also be mobile, utilizing some means of locomotion. On Pangonia, the clade that has bilateral symmetry and a means of locomotion has been given the name Motileae. The Motileae clade is best represented by its holotype specimen, Allostava lacuja. Allostava lacuja is a worm-like organism appearance-wise that grows to around 10 centimeters in length. Due to Allostava lacuja having a mobile lifestyle as a bilaterally symmetrical species, it has an elongated body with a larger anterior and a smaller posterior. The anterior of Allostava lacuja consists of 8 eyes and an oral cavity connected to a digestive tract that runs towards the posterior. The end of the digestive tract is located further from the posterior than the opening of the reproductive tract. Along the bottom of the organism are bands of muscles that assist in movement along the ocean floor. Allostava lacuja has an open circulatory system enclosed within a hemocoel. In order to help move the blood throughout the circulatory system, some of the muscles along the bottom of the organism loop around the hemocoel, which helps save energy as simply moving about pumps the blood throughout the body. Additional muscles form horizontal bands from anterior to posterior of the individual, resulting in a worm-like style of movement. While not as noticeable with Allostava lacuja, the body consists of countless segmented parts. Some of those parts have already experienced specialization as well as cephalization. This allows the sensory organs as well as its gas exchange processes to occur in closer proximity to one another. This also frees up the abdomen area to focus on movement without risking damage to important external organs. Cilia covers the body of Allostava lacuja and assists in sensing the flow of water in the train it is moving along for anything it may have missed, as its eyes are not yet that advanced. This species feeds on bacterial mats and detritus it comes across and sucks the food into its oral cavity. When reproducing, individuals raise their posteriors and bring them towards one another in order to share gametes. Female individuals then lay hundreds to thousands of fertilized eggs before moving on. The production of a large number of gametes is a feature of species that lean towards R selection. When talking about the life history strategies of a species, we refer to a spectrum between R and K selection. An example of an R-selected species is mice on Earth. These species produce many offspring, many of which will likely die before reaching sexual maturity. K-selected species include humans and whales. Both species produce a small number of offspring and raise those individuals to ensure their survival. It should also be mentioned that R-selected species are able to quickly take advantage of new available niches as well as recovering in post-extinction ecosystems. Given the explosion of biodiversity occurring on Pangonia at the moment, Allostava lacuja is able to take advantage of its evolved traits and its R-selected life history to make itself one of the dominant groups of life on Pangonia. But it isn't the only clade to claim dominance in Pangonia's oceans. The other type of symmetry that an animal can have is radial symmetry. Earth animals with this type of symmetry include sea stars as well as anemones. In order to differentiate the radially symmetrical Pangonia clade from that of the Motileae clade, the radially symmetrical species has a sessile lifestyle similar to that of Earth anemones. This lifestyle requires a far different body plan than that of a bilateral or radially symmetrical mobile animal. On Pangonia, the radially symmetrical sessile clade has been given the name Sedens. The Sedens clade is best represented by its holotype specimen Enseminen peruna. Enseminen peruna is a sessile filter feeder that can grow up to 10 centimeters tall. The species utilizes a basal disc to attach itself to the sea floor or a rock. The suction this provides keeps the individual in place for the majority of its adult life. The body then extends up about 5 centimeters in matured individuals. It is at that point that the main body ends with the mouth opening, surrounded by a ring of feeding arms or tentacles. These appendages extend about another 5 centimeters from their base to provide a large surface for capturing plankton and other small species to consume. Ensemine pruna has 8 of these feeding arms that it utilizes. At the end of all of these arms are basic eyes capable of perceiving light and darkness. Along the arms are gill surfaces which allow for oxygen exchange to occur. From the oral opening, the digestive tract opens up into a stomach, where food is digested and absorbed before waste is regurgitated back out through the mouth. Due to the radial symmetry of Ensemine pruna, a ring of gonads exists around the stomach, only one of which is shown in drawings to prevent cluttering. These gonads propel gamete cells into the upper part of the stomach when the mating season arrives. These gametes are then released into the ocean in a form of reproduction known as broadcast spawning. Upon making contact with gametes of the opposite sex, they will become fertilized and develop into an Ensemine pruna larva. The larval stage of Ensemine pruna has a similar appearance to the mature adult, but is motile, feeding on plankton and microbes. The larvae do not have matured gonads until they reach the point where they start to sexually mature and have attached themselves to a surface. Just like with Allostava lacuja, Ensemine pruna also has an open circulatory system. However, it has a nerve net, a decentralized, mesh-like nervous system found in Earth cnidarians and acts as a simplistic nervous system. Now that the 2 initial body plans have been explored, we will check in every million years to see how life has evolved from these 2 species. 1 million years after the start of our biodiversification event on Pangonia, the beginnings of new clades have already gotten underway. However, the biggest change in the planet's biosphere is not with animals, but with algae. Pangonia has many types of algae growing within its oceans. One specific species forms a complex colony early on in the history of Pangonia's biosphere. This algal species forms the ancestor of all photosynthetic species in the Folia lutea clade. This clade is distinguished by its yellow coloration. Maceralapidea, the ancestral species of the Folia lutea clade, displays a branching pattern as it grows, with leaves flanking either side of the stem and lateral shoots. As the earliest complex photosynthetic species, Maceralapidea doesn't grow very tall and dominates the coastlines as it quickly spreads to all areas of the oceans where it can take root. The gametangium of the species is located at the ends of the lateral shoots. The male gametangium takes on an appearance of a cluster of tendrils. These tendrils release their gametes similar to Ensemine pruna. However, the gametes don't meet up with other free-floating gametes, but are intended to land on the female gametangium of another Maceralapidea individual. The female gametangium is bowl-shaped and is tilted to the side in order to help catch male gametes. This will result in the formation of a spore which detaches from the gametangium and into the ocean currents. I should be clear about the fact that an algae forming an advanced colony structure at this point in a planet's history is likely near 0%. However, due to life colonizing land after the current supercontinent splits apart, I wanted to make sure each of the resulting continents has a specific look to it. As such, a terrestrial descendant of Maceralapidea will colonize the southern continent while an entirely different algal species colonizes the land of the northern continent. In addition to the different terrestrial plants, I wanted to give them different structural appearances, which is the main reason for this clade emerging so early on in the history of life on Pangonia. Folia lutea as a clade will feature plants with lateral shoots coming from the main stem at various heights, while the northern continent plants will have an appearance similar to the chemotrophic species featured in Bibliodarian's Alien Biosphere series with a central trunk and leaves coming out of the top of said trunk. A million years after the appearance of the Folia lutea clade, the Calvaria clade has branched off from Allostava lacuja. This clade is noteworthy for having the first fossilizable skeleton of any species. However, this clade hasn't physically changed its appearance much compared to Allostava lacuja. While the Calvaria clade began branching off from Allostava lacuja, another clade was evolving at the same time. Specifically, the clade that branched off from Allostava lacuja belongs to a class of organisms known as zooplankton. Prior to 539 million years ago, the Sedens clade larvae have been the only species that occupies the zooplankton niche, but are not present all the time due to their life cycles. As a result of this, large mats of photosynthetic plankton are able to form along the ocean's surface for significant portions of the year. This creates an open niche to be filled. Among the populations of Allostavulacuja, some individual organisms grow to a far smaller size. These specific individuals may benefit from decreasing their size. Their size becomes so extreme that strong water currents are able to lift them off of the sea floor. Lucky individuals could find themselves within the clouds of plankton along the ocean surface. This lifestyle selects for the individuals capable of jerky movements within the ocean currents as well as even smaller sizes. Eventually, these organisms will be the ancestors of the Navigare clade. Species within the Navigare clade do not grow longer than 1 millimeter in length. Their small sizes limit them to consuming phyto and chemoplankton species within the currents of the oceans. The Navigare clade has countless smaller clades within it, with some of those smaller clades being differentiated by their method of moving around. One of those groups has adapted the small cilia present along the bodies of their Allostavulacuja ancestors as structures to beat the water. Another group within Navigare utilizes large, flat surfaces to catch ocean currents to move around easier. A number of the subclades within Navigare consist of gill structures that have extended away from the body to allow better oxygen exchange as well as an additional surface to utilize in movement. Additionally, all species of the Navigare clade have expanded gonads in order to produce far larger amounts of gametes compared to their ancestral species. The only strategy that zooplankton species, like those of the Navigare clade, have against extinction is the production of countless offspring, and as such are an extremely R-selected clade. Due to the countless species present within the Navigare clade, there is no one species that fits the requirements of a holotype specimen. But countless examples have been shown throughout this section to show the various subgroups within the clade. One of the examples created to show the variations within the Navigare clade was designed as a predatory zooplankton. While this clade won't be looked at in any future videos, perhaps on Pangonia, some Navigare clade species evolve predatory behavior towards other zooplanktons. This time frame is filled with many new clades branching off for the ancestral species as adaptations and niches continue to be filled. The Motileae clade continues to diverge into new clades, but the Sedens clade experiences a burst of radiation by this time as well. 2 new Sedens clades will have fully diverged by this point in time. Besides those clades, a neoteny event has also occurred and will be explored more at the 531 million year ago time step. With the presence of algal colonies for around 2 million years at this point, some populations of Allostavulacuja found the difficult yet readily available plants to be a useful part of their diet. However, their rounded, featureless oral opening isn't suited well for ripping off pieces of plant to consume. As such, those capable of actively taking pieces off of the algal colony would have the advantage. The ancestors to the Crustea clade would adapt cilia around their oral cavity to form movable, mandible-like mouthparts. These mandibles would also open up the option to increase diets to include some meat, but most species in the Crustea clade by this point are strictly herbivorous. While the mandibles were developing, a problem would arise within these populations. Remaining on the sea floor could make it hard to consume large sections of the algal colonies, and competition would be fierce. This would incentivize an innovation allowing those species to move around efficiently within the marine ecosystems they inhabited. Once again, the cilia of their ancestors would be adapted. This time, instead of mandibles, the cilia would take on a role similar to that of the Navigare clade. This innovation would also be impacted by the ancestral segmentation. Body segments closer to the posterior lack any form of paddle fins. Towards the center of the body, each segment contains a single pair of paddle fins located on either side. Ahead of those segments is located a segment similar to those found along the center of the body, except the paddle fin is flanked by outwardly facing gills, utilizing the currents made by the paddle fins to move oxygen-rich water over them. Right before the anterior head, a section consisting of just an extending gill is found. The head segment contains a single gill and paddle fin behind the eyes, which have clustered together near the top of the animal. Unlike in the Allostavulacuja ancestors, the segments of the Crustea clade are noticeable as an additional adaptation has occurred. In order to provide structural support while swimming and provide a defense against the clades diverging from Calvaria, a chitinous exoskeleton has developed. This support also allows for a larger body size. At the same time, small gaps are present in the exoskeleton to allow additional mobility, and it also makes each segment along the body visually distinct units. All these segments, excluding the head and tail segments, can differ in number among species within the Crustea clade. A great example of the clade and its adaptations as a whole is a holotype specimen known as Melanchiori. Species of the clade can be found in the growing reefs of the Sedens clade as well as the underwater forests of Folia lutea. Species of this clade that make the reefs their home have fewer sources of Folia lutea to consume and as such have adapted a more omnivorous diet compared to their Folia forest cousins. The presence of Folia lutea isn't responsible for triggering just a single clade to diverge from Alostava lacuja. A second clade referred to as Xenovermis has also adapted in response to the presence of these plants. Instead of consuming them like the species of Crustea, this clade lives among the plants. The divergence began when smaller species of the Motileae clade climbed up the stems of Folia lutea species. Many would be sent down to the sea floor any time the plant swayed in the currents, but individuals with slightly longer tails had an easier time clinging onto the stems. As these individuals remained among the stems and shoots of Folia lutea species, their tails would elongate to consist of half of their overall body length. This massive tail would provide a useful means to anchor around the stem of plants so these organisms could collect plankton and zooplankton caught within the currents. Species of the clade have also evolved antenna structures which are utilized to sense currents and obstacles above them. The eyes have also moved to form a ring around the head of the organism to provide a wide range of view. Xenovermis species are terrible swimmers and have a hard time returning to a holdfast when they get swept away. They have jerky movements produced mainly by their tail, but also from countless cilia lining their bodies. If they are unable to find a plant to cling onto, they will grip onto rocks until currents are calmer. The holotype specimen of Xenovermis is the species known as Hekumato. This specific specimen has 5 cm long antennas, a body measuring 10 cm, and a 15 cm long tail. So far, the Motileae clade has experienced the greatest amount of diversification. This does not mean that the Sedens clade has been existing unchanged. Incinaminen peruna has been experiencing adaptive radiation which has been sped up as the Motileae clade diverges into new niches. The first of the 2 new clades that has evolved from the Sedens clade is the Maceralapidea clade. This clade has adapted 4 of its 8 feeding arms into short swiveling eyes. This helps ensure that should the feeding arm eyes or the feeding arms themselves incur damage, the individual is still capable of seeing its environment. Those eyes have also increased in their complexity compared to the eyes of their ancestral species. The remaining feeder arms form branches off of the main feeding arm to increase the surface area that can be used to catch food. Additionally, the gill surfaces of these feeding arms has also increased in surface area, with the increase in surface area occurring closest to the base of the feeding arms. The most striking adaptation of the Maceralapidea clade and the source of the clade's name is the use of a calcium carbonate shell. This shell helps provide protection from predation and damage to feeding arms and the eyes. Species of this clade form large colonies within the shallow oceans found along the coastlines of supercontinent Shukai. These colonies form their first reefs in Pangonia's oceans, providing hiding places for countless species. The larvae of the Maceralapidea clade have a similar appearance to their Sedens ancestral larvae, except for the eye stalks which are noticeably shorter. The holotype specimen for the Maceralapidea clade is the species known as Elava calciumia. The other clade to have fully diverged from the Sedens clade by this point in time is the clade known as Pedibus scopulum. This clade forgoes the calcium carbonate shells utilized by the Maceralapidea clade and instead retain the soft bodies of their Sedens ancestors. The most significant change that has occurred in the clade is the development of sections of the basal disc that have formed rudimentary legs. This clade has also ceased attaching itself to the seafloor permanently. As such, these species prefer waters with calmer currents, often leading to populations being located within the underwater forests formed by the Folia lutea species. Since they are far easier to hunt than their shelled cousins, the other adaptation of the clade assists in avoiding predation, that being the ability for the fully matured adults to move. They can do this by either walking along the sea floor, something that can also be done to find better currents to catch food, or by swimming away similarly to the earth anemone species Stophia coccinea. As a clade, Pedibus scopulum tends to be smaller and less diverse than the Maceralapidea clade. The holotype species of the Pedibus scopulum clade is known as Vara rituta. Some individuals among the Varrotuta species have developed a yellow coloration to camouflage among the leaves of the Lutea Folia plants. This time frame sees the last of the initial diversification from the two ancestral body plans of Pangonia's biosphere. It also sees the extinction of those two ancestral species as their descendants, adapted to the new niches provided throughout Pangonia's oceans, take their place. This is also the last time frame this video will be focusing on. The first of two clades that diverge from Calvaria, the Sedecamorph clade, is a clade of detritivore species. Many species also supplement their diets with plankton and phytoplankton in addition to detritus. It is the only clade as of this time that has had a pair of eyes become vestigial, remaining near the bottom of the head while the remaining sets of eyes moved upwards to form a cluster. Along the body of the Sedecamorph species is a total of 16 flippers. The second most posterior pair of flippers is far larger than the others. These flippers allow both slow and fast movement. However, Sedecamorphs tend to move relatively slowly most of the time. Cilia within the mouth have adapted to form appendages similar to that of cirri used by earth barnacles. These cirri assist the Sedecamorph in capturing plankton foods as well as scraping bacteria and detritus into the mouth. Around the mouth opening, a series of 4 extendable bumps have developed, also sharing in the task of removing bacterial mats from the seafloor and detritus that is stuck. Extending from the skull, a pair of spinal columns run down either side of the middle of the back, going all the way to the posterior of the organism. The posterior consists of 4 tails which assist in transferring gametes between mates. Species of the Sedecamorph clade are most commonly found in the shallow coastal waters surrounding Shukai. There is an abundant amount of bacterial mats and detritus to feast upon, as well as swarms of plankton in areas the filter feeders of both the Motis and Sedens clades can't reach. Smaller, isolated populations of this clade can be found along the ocean floors, where they feed on a diet consisting of far more detritus than their coastal relatives. On rare occasions, one can find individuals of a specific species with populations in both coastal and seafloor habitats. One such species that is known to do this is the Sedecamorph holotype specimen, Roscium cioja. However, the Sedecamorphs are not the only clade to diverge from Calvaria. The Maxilla carens clade has a very recognizable body plan to us humans, as it has convergently evolved a body for swimming like earth fish. Unlike earth fish, though, species of the Maxilla carens clade don't have one pair of their anal and pelvic fins. Instead, they have 2 of each, along with the pectoral fins being located more ventrally than on earth fish. In this way, the clade has also converged on adaptations seen in earth sharks, which is primarily due to the Maxilla carens clade being a predominantly predatory clade of animals. They have an additional dorsal fin located closer to their head. This primary dorsal fin and the pectoral fins are smaller than the other pairs of fins, as they are utilized for stability while swimming. The pelvic and second dorsal fin are the main steering fins. The anal fins assist in reproduction, while the third dorsal fin provides additional stability. The clade has also developed a caudal fin which propels the organism through the water with tremendous force. All 8 eyes of the Allocephalocuch ancestor have moved upward and form a line along the head. Even with all these adaptations, Maxilla carens species lack a jaw like fish and sharks on Earth. This may make this clade appear to be impossible to have evolved given the adaptations it has and is apparently lacking. Instead of a jaw, the Maxilla carens clade has adapted the cilia around and even inside the oral cavity of its ancestors into tentacle-like appendages. To avoid confusion with the pedipalps of Earth chelicerates, these appendages will be given the name pedipalps since they don't have the same segmentation as pedipalps. Some pedipalps are used to simply shove food into the oral cavity, which has shifted further back to make room for the pedipalps. The other pedipalps, which tend to also be the ones closer to the edge of the face, have hardened ends which help snare and cut into prey. With this lifestyle, the species of this clade are the first to reach sizes of up to 45 centimeters and will become a dominant part of the marine ecosystem for millions of years. The holotype species of this clade is the predatory Yudescan evat, a species that truly deserves to be called the first apex predator of Pangonia's oceans. As mentioned before, the Sedens clade experienced a neoteny event, which is a situation where organisms don't mature past their larval appearance when reaching adulthood. This event occurred before the Maceralapidea clade had fully diverged from the ancestral Sedens clade. As such, the shortened eye stalks are present in the clades that diverge as a result of that event, but they lack the mineral shell that was developed later on. When it comes to the gender of individuals, they only develop one once they reach sexual maturity. The first clade to diverge after the neoteny event would take the shape of the ancestral larva and stretch the body and tentacle lengths. This would result in an appearance similar to that of some cephalopods of Earth. However, it lacks a number of the same adaptations found in those individuals. To get around the lack of those adaptations, species of the Lengum corpus clade use their tentacles to propel themselves slowly through the ocean. Some species have also formed muscles around their oral cavity to act like a siphon, but it has additional downsides due to the open digestive system shared by all Sedens species. The body has also been adapted to create less drag while moving throughout the water. The primary diet of the clade consists of plankton, sessile clade larvae, and smaller species that it can capture. The clade has few species representing it as it faces tough competition in its environments, but the best holotype specimen of the clade is Neorvi luncaro. The other clade that diverged after the neoteny event is known as deambulatio. Instead of actively swimming, the species of this clade use their four tentacles as walking limbs. In order to move the limbs, a hydrostatic skeleton was adapted as it assists in both the movement of the limbs as well as holding the weight of the organism. They tend to move relatively slowly along the ocean floor, consuming mats of bacteria they come across. Since the species is flipped compared to other Sedens clade organisms, the eyes also point towards the ocean floor. The holotype specimen of deambulatio is known as Faltamarin risti. Similar to the Lengum corpus cousins, the species of the deambulatio clade face tough competition in their environments and as such have few species present within their clade. Even though only 10 million years have passed on Pangonia, the life forms of the planet have diversified to fill countless niches. While this is the end of this video, the next video will go all the way to the breakup of supercontinent Shukai and the start of plant life colonizing land. Throughout this video, you will have seen models and drawings of the various creatures I have created for this project. For each video I make in this series, there will be a thread held on the Thrive community forums where one can submit art for use in these videos. These contests will be open for both the community of Thrive and anyone else who wishes to partake in it. Also, for the next video, I will be making sure my images have color to them, as colorations will start to become more important as we move forward in the series. Once Thrive has entered the macroscopic stage of development and I am able to create in-game functional models of my creatures, I will be remaking the earlier videos in this series to add animations of each of the organisms for additional imagery amongst all the pictures and my hand-done and not great artwork. This will likely delay new episodes in this series while I'm working on that, but once I catch up, I'll be including in-game footage of Thrive as part of these videos.